All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use the question and answer tab on your interface and submit your questions. And we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a very interactive chat interface here, and so we encourage you to chat us your questions, comments, whatever you want to share with us. We'll be more than happy to take it from you, and we might even incorporate that into the conversation today. So hopefully we can get everybody involved. We also, speaking of getting you involved, we also have 3 polling questions throughout the webinar today. So again, when you see those pop up, hopefully we can get you involved in those. And then finally, at the end, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Release Me, how release management is getting into the DevOps flow. Our speakers today are Helen Beal, who is the Chief Ambassador at the DevOps Institute, and Jeffrey Keyes, who is the VP of Product at Plutora. Hey guys, great to see you again.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you as always.
Oh, well, I will take myself off camera and let you guys get right to it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charlene. Sorry, I forgot to just skip to this slide, but yes, this is us. And yes, we are more than happy to take questions the whole way through. So put them in the Q&A. And today we have a very special guest, Simone Jo Moore. She's here. Simone, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
I don't know how to say hello. Should I say bonjour? Should I say g'day? Should I say hello? I mean,
it looks like people from all over the place. Belgium, Midlands, Berlin. So you should probably be a bit multilingual today. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, there was an Irish in there too, if I remember right.
But we'll leave that one for the pub moment. Hey, how fabulous is this? This is an amazing thing. Yes, release me. Wow. Okay, so moving beyond technology has really, is something that has defined us. And I think what we're moving into is where we're harnessing it in order to become and live as whom we want to be. And we need to remain fluid in the way we approach change beyond digital transformation. So this is really my focus. I mean, my love affair with technology began very early. Lots of technology shifts. If you're having a look at the screen, you can see that I started my journey learning to type on a manual typewriter. When I was in the Army, it was all telex machines and various communication equipment, Murray code, Morse code, all that kind of stuff. When I left there, I was all of a sudden thrown into the whole PABXs and other comms equipment and satellites and more. So my service and support career has been quite long. Now as a consultant, coach and trainer, it's like I carry my plug with me wherever I can plug in. That's great. Right now, I'm at home, Zooming along with everyone else. But I think, with my background, it also includes HR and organizational change and complementary health. So really for me, the most fascinating technology is really the human brain. And that's led me into the other areas around machine humanity, being the editorial director of the Era of Humanizing IT docuseries and a lot of research and writing around ethical AI and emotional AI. So my drive is to really keep active the humanness needed in evolving our organizations and leadership and development approaches, helping humans flourish through exceptional experiences while we rediscover our humanity in this high-tech, VUCA, incredible technology world.
We certainly have a lot in common, and hopefully we won't go on too many divergences into neuroscience today because we could risk that. We've got a wonderful audience from all over the place today, so welcome everybody. This is the first in a series of 3 in our release management series. Right at the top of the chat, you can find a link to the ebook. We'll refer you to it at the end as well. But we have just published a new book called The Evolution of the Release Manager. So we're starting with Simone today with, I feel like I should sing it, but I've got a terrible singing voice, so I'm not going to do that to everybody. But Release Me, how release management is getting into the DevOps flow. And next time, we're going to be with Mark. And then we're going to be with Ryan. So we're following some flow, sort of going through how release management is evolving over time. So let's get started by having a poll. So Charlene, if you could start us off on the first poll, and then we'll talk through the agenda.
Absolutely. The first poll has just gone out. The question is, do you believe the release manager role is still needed? You can choose from yes, no, not sure, or other. Please answer in the chat. The poll question is right there on your on the polls, in the polls tab on your interface. So you can go ahead and access it there. I'm going to leave this poll open for a minute or two, and Helen, you can get back to your discussion, and then we'll circle back later and take a look at the poll results.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Charlene. I do think the title Release Me is so funny. Me and my partner always laugh when we're on an aeroplane, you know, when they say cabin crew released after takeoff. I don't know why, but that just really tickles us. But let's look at our flow today. So we're going to look at our talk map. So we're going to start by talking about release managers, weekends and calendars. So in a moment, we'll have a look at that poll that you're doing right now, and that'll kick us off for that. Then we're going to talk about these human elements, the silos and conflict and friction. And Simone and I will try not to get too distracted by neuroscience. And then we will talk about releasing the 3-way style. So, of course, our DevOps 3 ways. Hopefully everyone's familiar with that. If you're not, we'll talk you through it. Of course, we're talking flow, feedback, and continuous learning. And then we'll finish by helping us understand how we get from one state to another. So we will hopefully have time for questions at the end. Any of you that have been to our webinars before, and I know quite a few of you have, know that we're not very good at leaving lots of time at the end. So we will be taking Q&A the whole way through, but hopefully we'll have a bit towards the end. But you can put Q&A in the box when they pop into your head at any time, and we will try and answer them as we go through. So Charlene, if you're ready, let's have a look at that release manager poll.
All right, we had quite a few people answering. The poll question was, do you believe the release manager role is still needed? And a whopping 87% said yes. 10% said they're not sure. Only 2% though said no. So there you go. We had one person actually answer other, and I am not quite sure what they said. Oh, it depends on the maturity of the teams, it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the other is an automated AI function.
We'll come to that later, I think. But yeah, co-input depends on the maturity of the teams. In some cases, someone needs to pinpoint teams at quality measurements and gates. So we're getting already some hints of where we might be going with this. But let's talk about the situation that we are in. I appreciate some organizations may have changed the ways that they're working, but let's talk about this kind of ITSM-centric way of working, where we've got these silos and we've got release managers, we've got release weekends, and we've got calendars. Now, typically this environment is quite intense. There's a lot of unplanned work because we've got systems that are very old, decades old, very sophisticated, complex, interdependent, and quite fragile. So we're experiencing lots of incidents. So Simone, give us your view of this type of working environment and how we've got here.
Well, I'm very pleased to see that most people believe release managers are still needed because, quite frankly, along with their support management colleagues, they're chaos coordinators, right? So I think it's just fabulous that we still have that there. I think, you know, this working 24/7 and that sort of thing, the weekends and the calendars, you know, it's really about expectation management, isn't it? I mean, you know, if you're really interesting, if you ask the client, do you work 24 hours a day? It's really quite interesting when we get into the crisis management mode. I think there's an expectation that that expectation, I think, do you know, IT has played a part in creating that expectation, and now we're trying to garner it back. You know, and how we manage that. And I think this is one of the reasons I love DevOps and the early testing and shifting left and all the rest of it, because, you know, I want that release to be painless. So I think that, this working weekends and the calendars and what's happening unplanned, and the burnout and the stress that comes with it, when you've got no time to stop, let's just get through until the morning and it'll all be okay. The point is, it's never going to be just okay. And the queue is never going to be empty. I think people have to get over that fact. So we need to be more agile in our focus and apply that first way of DevOps. Where is our flow?
So that's some of the good stuff about why we might need release manager. But Jeff, maybe you can talk about some of the cons or the negative things that having that role in place can create in an organization.
Well, I think in a lot of organizations, release management is seen as the wall, the brick, the immovable force, and the representation of governance and a culture of control that is an anti-pattern for everything DevOps, right? DevOps, we want a world of autonomous teams, cross-functional, and I think the traditional way of thinking is, well, that release manager is the guy. He's who won't let me, get my stuff out there. That jerk won't do it. Or as a quote that I've quoted often, one of the first heads of release management that I ever met, that was a prospect on Plutora, said, yeah, our company's been doing DevOps for 18 months, and those guys have yet to release anything. And it's like there's this mismatch of what's going on, and that's why it's a struggle. I've even heard very prominent DevOps proponents say, release management that's a legacy thing. We don't need that anymore. The new culture is just all automated. That's antiquated practices.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of tension here. I think, we've created these roles and these processes to control that chaos, which is caused by all these dependencies that we have in our systems, both people and technological. We create some of the process around release calendars, which is, or release weekends, which is not a very sustainable way of working. Nobody wants to work weekends, right? A release calendar is an interrupter into our flow. It doesn't allow us to do things as and when we want to do them. So there's good and there's bad here. So when I was writing the ebook that is linked at the top of your chat that we'll refer to again at the end, when I was writing it, we wanted some real voices in there. So we went out to a number of people that we knew, and they are all going to be featured in the series. So Simone is one of those people that is featured with her thoughts in the book, along with Mark Peters and Ryan Sheldrake, who are coming up in the next couple of webinars. And Simone said this. I'm going to read it out, and then I'm going to ask you to reflect back on your comment. They were a barrier, the knights protecting the castle against the storming of the bastion by the development teams. There was a melee of forces fighting against each other. The customers were the crying peasants in the weeds of the castle, begging for scraps. And it's very Game of Thrones, isn't it, Simone? What's going on there? Why the high drama?
Because this is the reality of what people have experienced over the last few decades. I mean, it really is. And because I've been on both sides of that wall, and as a, support center director and manager, there's this thing about, throwing dead cats over the wall. Well, I can tell you what's worse than a dead cat being thrown out the wall or released into the environment. Whatever it was that was released just isn't working, is an injured cat. Okay, because if something is only partial of what it was meant to bring, man, that's just it. It's messy, it's scratched, there's blood everywhere. So yes, it is high drama, because I can guarantee you that most of the time these releases are done early morning. This is the calendar thing. Oh, let's do this on Sunday, 2 a.m. Are you kidding me? Because I can guarantee you on Monday morning support, guess what the calls have done in the queue? Whoomp, complete spike. So I think this is why, this was the past. The release manager was meant to be the knight. The release manager is there meant to protect from that stuff actually getting into the live environment, so the customers and the people that had to support and maintain didn't experience the death and destruction, I guess.
And there's this is all quite painful and violent. We've had blood going everywhere, isn't it? I mean, Jeff, is this the world that you want to live in?
Yeah, this is so relevant for everything we see, and it feels like too, in order to ward off the the storming bastion of development teams, those knights have been sent out further and further upstream in the process to figure out what's going wrong. Don't wait for the day before when stuff's supposed to be thrown over the wall. Hey, why don't you start looking out earlier? And thus we started changing the definition of what does it mean to release? Well, and what does a release manager actually look at? Well, now they're looking at stuff that's in the process. We have release managers that have their calendar scheduled out for the year. These are all the trains that are going to the station. These are all the times that you can get across that wall. And they start looking at the quality of the stories that are coming in. And they're looking at to see if, well, wait, if they're bringing something that's they haven't even figured out what it is, and they're just now defining it the day before, stop. Let's not do that. And they're bringing that further and further up, and that's their job now is to help that process.
Absolutely. And we're getting some fantastic comments from the audience, which I want to share with you as well. So Alan said, DevOps is good, but release on demand does not work in huge enterprises. So it needs to have a release manager. Otherwise, it's chaos. And then we've got even small releases need release managers. Otherwise, different swim lanes deploy anything, anytime. I've seen a lot of time environments down and then need some governance. I'm sure that last comment will resonate very deeply with you in particular. And Jeff, and really just Alan, I just want to really highlight that this is the whole point of this series. This is what we're trying to show, is how even large enterprises can move over time from one state to another. And let's just have a quick look at what we're talking about when we talk about one state to another. And of course, DevOps ways of working, it's a really, really broad church, right? It's a huge movement. There are so many moving parts, but I do really love this table because it does give us quite a nice summary of what we're trying to go to and from. So I have highlighted the release row here. So we're trying to get from this high risk, bloody, violent Game of Thrones event to something where it literally is just a little bit of neuroscience for us, something that your brain is doing without you even thinking about it. Like breathing. Jeff, do you want to talk us through how some of these other rows are directly related to how we influence what happens in our release world?
Yeah, there's some really big transitions that have to happen in the culture and the way of thinking. The idea of a segregation of powers and a segregation of duties, cross-functional teams, man. If the team owns the value delivery cycle. And if that's the case, well, then stop, from an agile perspective, stop holding inventory, if you will, from a lean thinking perspective, and start creating little small batches of work and funnel those through. So the first two rows really focus on that is this cross-functional teams, make them more autonomous so they have a lot more stuff that's flowing through with small little incremental changes to help reduce how much is at risk, how much is being held on to, and get the feedback loops more frequent and iterative if you can. Then what that means is, well, gosh, now let me start scheduling these things out. I can have standardized ways to look at my scheduling where I can have a lot of these things that are coming in, smaller batches from all over the place, breaking the dependencies as I go. You got to find a way, though, if you're going to make that happen. Well, I can't rely on the old methods of let me have a room full of people. I got 50 people in a room once a month to figure out what's going to happen in the next quarter's release. That model doesn't work. It's a huge waste of time. That means you've got to have some way to get information that's going to come automatic and transparently to every team, independent of how they work. And that means, well, gosh, now if I've got everything automated, I'm going to be changing things. If I've got all that data, I can start getting metrics of delivery and start to standardize. All these roles are super important. I hope you take some time to go through the book because everything is connected. And you've got to do this this is a transformation project.
Simone, you're nodding.
Oh, I'd actually take it beyond. It's not a project, actually. This is actually a way of being on a regular basis. So, yep. Every time I hear the word project, I almost cringe because I'm waiting for that go live date and just pushing it out there. And then everyone thinks that that's the end of it. And it's just the way we have thought in a traditional manner, right? It's like, okay, we've done our bit, it's your turn now. And I think one of the things I like about this and the Everything is Connected is that there are responsibilities, that there are gray areas, and it's better to be able to we have a better responsibility having a collective ownership in certain responses. And I think the culture builds that to some way. It's like, if we want to automate, it's great, but is AI a trusted gatekeeper at the moment? We still have trust in people, we're still building trust in people. So I think that it's like breathing. I'm not holding my breath hoping that this is going to get released. I don't want to be in that traditional mode anymore. I as a customer support person, I don't want to be sitting there going, please work, please work, please work. I like the color blue, but not if it means oxygen deprivation. Okay. So we need to remember that risk management, it's about gambling. And in the traditional side of the high risk, do not fail, or, you'll lose your job over it and things like that. I've seen stuff like this happen in the traditional environment. It's not about, when we think risk management, it is exactly like gambling. And if we move into that, the decentralized continuous and the smaller iterations and things like that, because it's not about how much you can bet, it's actually about how much you can afford to lose. Mm-hmm. So this high trust fail early, and the value outcome, we realize, smaller and smaller. It means that the risk factor, we can actually trust it more, and we're more likely to keep moving forward than going, oh my God, and trying to hold on to the bank.
Yeah, completely. And I just want to reflect on a couple of things you said, and relating to that last point you made as well. The thing you described at the start of what you just said, I always call it people thinking about the wedding and not the marriage. So we focus on that big live date at the end of this big batch of stuff in our project. And Jerry's put in the comments, project to product. That's of course what we're talking about, is, as you just said in your last comment, this is a continuous, and Jeff's used the word as well, incremental way of working. Someone else just put, so many comments coming through in the chat. Cohen said, thinking in terms of projects is indeed a big showstopper for moving away from releasing large batches. And it's so ingrained, this project-centric thinking. But hopefully today, when we talk about value stream thinking, that will help give you some guidance on how to help an enterprise start moving in that direction. Just one more comment before we move on to the next piece. I wanted to pick up on something Simone said, which I think we're getting into quite a granular level now, but there is these definitions of deploy and release. And I used to talk about release and deploy, and I've been in organizations like UBS where they release. So they have a whole set of kind of non-technical items they do in their run book. And then they had, or they may not anymore, so I'm going to say they had deploy, which are the technical things like create war file and things like that. But actually increasingly, we're talking about decoupling deploy and release. So we'll deploy to the live system, and then we'll choose when to release to the customer. And we'll use things like limited blast radius techniques, like canary testing, to do all of that. So we have lots of these things that do what you were just talking about, Simone, in terms of reducing risk. So we reduce risk by not committing to a massive batch of work. We reduce risk by releasing small increments of our work when the customer wants it. So there's lots and lots of techniques here that hopefully help us manage this better. But I think it's time for another poll, please, Charlene.
Yes, absolutely. The poll has just gone out. The poll question is, what's the state of release management in your organization? You can choose from, we have a central release management organization that manages all releases. We have a distributed release management organization. We don't have release managers. Our teams manage their own releases. Releases are managed by each value stream. We have release trains and engineers or other. Please comment in chat. So as always, I'm going to leave the poll open and let you guys get back to your conversation. Then we'll take a look at the results a little bit later on.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I'm going to ask Simone a question, which is, what is the biggest barrier to people thinking like product, not projects?
Or the other way around?
But I want them to think like products, not projects. Yeah.
Biggest barrier. I think part of it is that they're having to switch their mindset from a particular way of working. I think it comes back to how the organization positions itself in terms of its intent and purpose. So thinking like product is very much around, are we just, what is the outcome that we're actually after here? Because if we're after delivering X amount of services and products, and bang, there you go, how many go live dates have we had, how much revenue is that project worth versus what we got on the contracts, there you go. And I know I'm simplifying in a way here, but I just think that, you know, that thinking still exists, especially in the larger organizations, where I think from a product perspective, we are talking about the immediate impact and outcome on the customer's day-to-day working, what it means to their role, what is the outcome in what they produce, and how are we enabling them. I think what is making their life easier and better day to day, not waiting 3 months or 6 months down the track for life to be better for them. It's just a different way of looking at it.
I remember having a chat with Mark Schwartz once. I think I was interviewing him for Q for the Art of Business Value or something. And I said, what do you say to organizations that can't commit to having full-time product owners, which is a classic problem I've seen in my consulting days? And he was like, well, you stop using those sort of words for starters. You start asking them, how would it be if I gave you some feedback or showed you the system in 2 weeks instead of 6 months? Would that be better for you? And you have conversations at that kind of level. And I think in addition to all those things you were just talking about in terms of mindset and things, I think there's a relationship with organizational design as well. So we've had this classic kind of hierarchical organizational design, which has led to us having silos, which meant that work is bumped across things. But when we start thinking more like a value stream, so we start doing what you've just said, thinking about our idea or our vision and when to deliver it to the customer, we start smoothing those bumps. The reality is that in an enterprise, and, you know, we've already had comments from the audience about how complicated these enterprises are. And honestly, we know, we do understand, we've worked in them, we've worked with them, we know how complex those environments are from both the people and technology perspective. So you get this kind of jumble of the value streams and they're all crossing over and you've got these interdependencies. But actually, this kind of A to B linear way of viewing a value stream isn't that helpful anyway, because it's continuous, right? We already established that. It's a loop, it's a circle, it's a cycle that we're going around. But then we've got that reality still exists when we've got all these dependencies that we've talked about. And Jeff talked about the need to break these, not manage them. But the reality is you can't click your fingers and break them overnight. There is an extended period, probably of years, where you will be managing these and working steadily, chipping away at these, you know, using strangler patterns in the technical systems, but figuring out new organizational designs to get to something that looks like this. And, you know, maybe you'll never get to that. But you can certainly give it a go. I think so many great chats coming through, by the way. I was just going to remind the audience that you can ask questions.
Great. I was actually...
Yeah.
I was looking at the last one, and I remember when we were talking about this, that it's great to have autonomous teams, etc. But we still, that's why I like the circle around the outside of it, because, you know, the conversation between dev and ops still needs to shift and improve. You know, development, making sure that ops knows what they need to know. And I think it still continues to be a failure in some organizations. So I think not including ops in the design is a mistake. Right. And in most organizations, the conservative guard who mistrusts the new way of working, I mean, they're not truly believing it's safer, yet if we can look, because, oh, it's an autonomous team, they have their own decisions. But if you've got the right governance in place as guidelines, they're still required. So people are still working to a what's the word? They're still working in the same manner in a sense. They're still using the same play rules. You know, they're still playing in the same sandbox, if you like. But it doesn't have to be the big governance. Doesn't have to be the big hard stick people think it is. These are guide rails that we need to build in through that continuous compliance. And then that, you know, having autonomous teams is not such a big issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, in fact, if you can decide up front what that governance is and then automate the snot out of it, and then, practice the automation of that governance and the verification and validation, now you've just created an on-ramp to get you there faster, and that makes everybody happy. And that brings the whole team together. Like you're saying, Simone, you got to bring DevOps together. It needs to be part of the cross-functional team.
Absolutely. Shall we have our poll results, please, Charlene?
Absolutely. All right. The question was, what's the state of release management in your organization? And we had some really, really great responses for this. I think you guys might be interested in hearing these results. 35%, which was the largest number, largest percentage, said they have a central release management organization that manages all releases. The second largest group, 21%, said their teams manage their own releases. And the third largest group, 16%, said they have a distributed release management organizations. So there were 11% who said they don't have release managers, and also 11% who said they have release trains and engineers, and then 5% said releases are managed by each value stream. So there you have it. We have a couple others that I think you guys have commented on already that in the chat box. But yeah, those are the results.
No surprise, I don't think that still we've got 35% of a central function.
Not from my perspective. I mean, there is a journey that every individual team is going on, and to presume that they're all on that journey at the same speed, having started at the same time, are going to end at the same time into the into a more autonomous way it's a fallacy from the start. Forget about it. We want to set up guardrails that anybody can travel at whatever speed that they can, that makes sense for them as an organization. That's the point.
Absolutely. Simone, any surprises in that poll response from you?
No, I think because I kind of know. No, actually, the one thing that pops out for me is that, most of the time we centralize stuff because we want to have greater control over things, right? That tended to be the reason we have it. I'm actually just curious, though, because I think it's about the context of the organization. Would we find the same type of governance guardrails in a centralized and a distributed system? It would be really interesting to see if they still had the same kinds of policies and stuff, which then actually nullifies the whole debate, doesn't it?
Perhaps we need to do some deeper research. I want to just mention a couple more comments from the audience. Andrew said there is no finish line for a product. And that, of course, is it's the marriage we talked about, and hopefully a long one. So, yeah, let's just talk then. And I just want to mention another comment from the audience, which came from Cohen. He said, the barrier from moving to projects to products is the business fearing to lose control over the budget. So it's the micromanagement and wanting to have that power over budgets and probably people as well. So let's talk a little bit about what are the things that are in the way from moving we'll call it from project to product, but we could say from traditional ITSM to DevOps and value stream thinking. So Jeff, what are the easy things for us to do?
Well, the easy things are those teams that just don't understand, right? And they need to, a little bit of pushing to get over the top of why this world will be better instead of the big batch, waterfallish type style where it's chaos and people hate their jobs because of that release weekend. And you can train, you can coach, you can help folks understand through certifications, through understanding. There's some fantastic materials already out there about the benefits of Agile, DevOps, and project to product and what that means. Easy to solve other kinds of things are the things like off-the-shelf application integrations. How do you handle costs as part of the process? What do you do for environment and environment resources? My goodness, one of the stupidest things I see out there is there's distributed environments all over the place and nobody has any idea what's where. There's solutions out there for it. My goodness, it's your ROI is in terms of months. Just I've seen it be as low as 4 months and you get a better ROI. Other ones fit into the CI/CD and the value that we're going to talk more about of building off and testing earlier and getting into this constant cycle of getting familiar with creating artifacts and validating them earlier in the cycle. Those are easy to solve, and lots have been written, lots has been discussed about them.
Absolutely. And Simone, what's your view on this? What are the things that are in the way, and how do we get them out of the way?
Yeah, why did you leave the hard ones for me and gave Jeff the easy ones? I mean, seriously? I mean, one of the things that, I mean, we've already talked about, people think governance is immutable, you know, but there are shiftable constraints. They're seeing it as these really tight controls, but, you know, we have to understand what is out of our control and what are what we call enabling constraints, right? And I think, and this is part of, you know, it's not so much a controlling culture and bureaucracy, she says, as she lives in France and all that paperwork, but hey, it was a French word. But, you know, these are habits, and we measure towards the behaviors. So I think, you know, even something as simple as regulatory compliance, and I say it is simple because the rules are clear, right? The laws are there and this is what we have to do. So we need, what we want to move to is a more collaborative risk management, working with our auditors and regulators as to what is the actual extreme boundary that we need to, that we can work in. How much creative play space do we have? And I call it sandbox thinking in a way. If I want to look at complex ecosystems, it's really easy. Just look at a beach. We can have the giant sandbox so we can be as creative as we like. When I say, hey, build me a sandcastle, everyone's got a different idea of what that sandcastle will look like, right? Unless you give them a picture. We might just dump sand in a bucket and turn it upside down. Or you're going to get the people in the organization that are really super creative and make this incredible sand sculpture. You know, who said a castle had to look like one with turrets and a door, right? And the drawbridge. So
I made one like a turtle once. I made a sand turtle.
Yeah. So we need to understand what is the size of our sandbox that we have to play in when it comes to, you know, remodeling the way the organization looks like, how we, you know, do the design of that. But, you know, even on a beach, even as large as that might be, we still have to understand what those risks are. You know, we've got the rock pools, we've got what might live in those rock pools. You can hear the Australian coming out of me now. You know, be aware of the things that bite, sting, and can kill you. But if you understand what those boundaries are, working with the auditors and the regulators, working with the leaders in the organization and saying, well, you know what, I can be as creative as I like within it, as long as I understand what the guidelines are that the organization needs to achieve its objectives.
Absolutely. So let's have a think about how we apply the 3 ways to all of this. These, of course, are the underpinning principles of DevOps, if you're not familiar with them. So the first way is about flow. So optimizing the flow from left to right and getting a profound understanding of the system. The second way is about amplifying and shortening feedback loops. And the third way is about continuous experimentation and learning. So these are our little PDCA or plan, do, check, act cycles in here. So with flow, this means that we haven't got the wait time for releases. We haven't got those things in the way. It's on demand. We've got we hopefully, not therefore, have a low change fail rate. Because, of course, if we have a high deployment frequency and a high change fail rate, that doesn't really help because we're just pushing through. I'm trying not to say a swear word, pushing through lots of not very good stuff through our pipeline. Feedback-wise, we need our CI/CD pipeline. Jeff talked about this. We need that feedback from the tests and from everything else. If things are going right, we want all that telemetry and observability. We've got a great question from the audience I'm hoping we'll get to at the end, which is about issues found by customers in production. I'm going to leave that for the last bit for now. And this isn't just about figuring out if stuff's got wrong. It's about informing us about what we should do next. And this is what we're doing next. So deciding whether to pivot or persevere, the ability to adapt and not be disruptive. And that demands that we continuously learn. In the chat, actually not in the questions, I did pick up a question from Parul that I want to mention here. The question is, I'm a release manager, but now the teams are doing their own releases and we are going towards automation. How exactly is a release manager involved in DevOps? Now, Parul, I'd really encourage you to come to the other two webinars in this series, because that's absolutely what we're addressing. I'd really encourage you to download the ebook as well, because that's exactly what we're drilling into, what the old kind of release manager looks like, what the new release manager looks like, what a release manager can also move into in other roles. But let's look at some of Simone's view on this as well. So Simone, I think you just said some of this, but let's just recap. Do you want to talk us through these guardrails and this idea of continuous compliance? Oh, your video's stuck. I'm wondering if
I think when I think about the 3 ways, I mean,
we're having a little bit of distortion on Simone at the moment.
Can you still hear me though?
Back. Yeah, you're back. So yeah, carry on, please. No,
okay.
We lost you again.
So I think when I think about the 3 ways and what I have you got me?
Intermittently, have one more go. If not,
here?
A couple of minutes break. Okay, I'm going to pick.
So how is that?
I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes break, and we'll let it settle down for a minute or two. So when we're talking about continuous compliance, what we're talking about is really making friends with your auditors and in your business and the people that run your governance. So it's not something that hits you hard at the end of the project and you've got it all wrong, but it's something that you are like collaborating with them on a day-to-day basis. And this means that you can be friends with your regulators as well. They're not necessarily people that you need to be scared of. You can actually be having a dialogue with them on a day-to-day basis. And I think Simone might be back, so let her give a quick comment on continuous compliance, and then Jeff can finish us up on this one and we'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, does that work? Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Great. As I said, out in the French countryside, so no fiber, sorry. I think when I think back to the 3 ways in this and the continuous compliance, for me, it's like working as in optimal state as a human being. We need to apply that flow science and be in the zone. That in the zone feeling when everything's working in that flow. And that's part of what continual compliance is about, is not having that, the stop start and having to say, oh, can't do any more because I've got to check in with the, governance thing and do this checkbox and so on and so forth. Because we've built it into the flow. And the same with the feedback. You can have the best pipeline in the world with your business, but, systems make it possible, but it's people that make it happen. So, yes, you need that relationship with your regulators and whatever the policies are going on within the organization, so they can help you understand what's an enabling constraint versus what is not, what we can't change, so we can create the right things around that. I mean, in a VUCA world, we want it can be volatile, but we want to move from like volatile to vibrant. We don't want to move from uncertain to being unreal. We want to move from complex. Okay, we can be a little crazy, but we want to move from ambiguous to being astounding. So I think in terms of the feedback that we have, continuous compliance is also about that. What's working, what's not working, what's barrier or what's helping us. And so the experimentation part of continuous compliance for me is, especially from a release management perspective, if I want to pivot or persevere against this rail or work with this rail so it helps guide me, I mean, is it going to be like a Russian drama or a Greek tragedy? Or am I actually going to, is it going to end up, how's it going to be a comedy or that sort of thing? I mean, we're at a point where we want to stop asking what you want to be and start asking who you want to be through this. What are the values that are driving it? And compliance, the way we look at that, it's a value. What do we value in terms of, risk? What do we value in terms of how we comply? Why does it matter? So
I'm actually going to ask you to hold on, Jeff, for a few minutes to share your thoughts on governance. I'm just keeping my eye on the clock there. So this series really is about getting you from here, where your hair's on fire and you're in an unsustainable way of working and you've got release weekends, to a place where you can celebrate, because things are like breathing and you are releasing much more frequently. You haven't got release nights because you're doing things like you've been experimenting with workflows, you've tried different change and release types, you've automated your release checklists, and you've got ultimately releases are part of your daily work because you've got fully autonomous releases. And what I've done there in about 30 seconds is summarize about 6 years' work for most organizations. So bear with us through the series, and we will drill down in more and more detail on how to get all these pieces together. But as Simone says here, it really is all about transparency. And Simone, with your eye on the clock, because we are ticking along today and we've got another poll to do in a moment, just talk us through quickly here about the relationship between the V model and what we're trying to do.
Well, I think a lot of people are used to seeing a lot of the waterfall and thinking the V model is only waterfall. What I find really interesting, and I have seen work very well, is we can still take that. What we're doing is speeding up some of the areas of the V model in some organizations. So I found it quite useful where those that are still kind of stuck and we need to sort of transition them, we still want that transparency there. The earlier that we have the testing, the better it is. We know that, and the smoother things will flow. So I think, you know, when you have things like a value stream workshop, everyone understands what those activities are, when they need to take place, and how we can make them take place. You know, who's involved, what can we integrate, how can we collaborate and improve what those models are that we're using. So I think that, you know, testing at every level can still be a must for some organizations, but let's make sure that the way in which we go about it, and this is what I love about DevOps, you know, the way in which we focus on it, the way in which we go about it, you know, we can fulfill our long-term vision and purpose much faster. These things are not carved in stone. So it's not like, oh, I only have to use that model, but it's actually a stepping stone that can help you move from where you are into the newer ways of working when it comes to defining what, you know, our testing, our risk appetite, and all of that kind of stuff. It should be a dynamic, iterative process.
Absolutely. So let's have another poll. And while people are answering that poll, Jeff can talk about governance and various other bits and bobs. But let's get the poll running first, please, Charlene.
Absolutely. The polling question is, where are you on the capability map? You can choose from multiple selections. You can release from, we release every 6 months, we release every 3 months, we release every sprint, we release on demand. We have release weekends, we have release nights, or releasing is like breathing, as in, I guess it happens all the time. So you can go ahead and make your choices. And Jeff, I'll let you continue on. I'll keep the poll open, and we'll discuss the results a little bit later on.
You bet. You know, as we talk about this, there's an overarching theme that we need a new way of thinking and managing the process of software delivery. And it's going to be where we can use data to help us through the process. If you generalize this discussion, you get to the core problems that value stream management solves. And they mostly focus around visibility and data. So the first problem is looking at the fragmented visibility along the application delivery pipeline, all the way back from if they're still project oriented and setting up budgets and estimations, or even product of like what's in the backlog, what's planned, what are the expected outcomes of that solution, all the way through into delivery and value recognition by the customer. Well, if you can't see what's happening at a single pipeline, you certainly aren't seeing what's happening at a portfolio level with the various dependencies and the various kinds of delivery points that are happening along the way. Well, embedded in that second problem is the third problem. Hey, everybody's using different technologies, different methodologies, and how do you manage that? Not just different methodologies, but different speeds depending upon the kind of releases that are going on. I might have one for a hot fix that's very different than a CI/CD that's very different from a quarterly release that includes, you know, back-end mainframe kind of stuff. We need a way to manage and optimize these disparate pipelines. And ultimately, without data, you can't manage it. If you can't manage, you certainly don't have a method for continuous improvement. You might make improvements, but as Helen, I've heard you quote, I love the saying, if you have no data, how will anybody ever know that you actually improved? You can't ever really get there. Well, enter value stream management to solve these problems and help you in this journey. And one of the primary people that value stream management really helps are the release management group. Because as you're going along in this journey, you become the key holder because you see the entire value stream. You're trying to flow stuff through the system. You care very much about this. So my bit of commercial here is, hey, look, I'm Jeff Keyes. I'm a value stream management provider. We're a cloud-based solution. We integrate data across the portfolio. We're not a planning tool. We're not a CI/CD tool. We're not a testing tool. What we do is we ingest data across the entirety of the all the value streams across all the portfolios, if you will. That data creates visibility. It's automatic. It's transparent. That visibility creates efficiency and collaboration. That's the key. You want to create separate pipelines that are faster because you can verify the governance right in there? Great, we'll help you that. You want to deal with and homogenize, if you will, legacy waterfall with faster moving DevOps and CI/CD? Great, we'll help you do that. You want to modernize how release management works so that you can go from being big batch size in the old world and still make that world easier, but yet act also as a data coach and somebody beating on the DevOps team saying, why aren't you automating more of this stuff up front so that I can just trust that it goes because I don't want to do this role anymore of checking this manually? Great, we got tools for all that. So as a platform, we ingest data in. We have these management orchestration. One of the key aspects of management orchestration is around the release management function, meaning from idea to production, scoping, not just the transition, go live. We've got tools for that as well from a deployment management where we can intermix the automated and human tasks as part of a go live weekend. But we can also help you on the times that you're just having them flow through. And you as a release management group can offer data to coach people, which brings us to really one of the big value points of the platform. We're a decision-making and analytics provider. We'll give you comparative analytics. We'll give you oversight and into the pipelines, traceability of initiatives all the way through the process. We have an environment management function. I talked about that before as being the simplest problem to solve. I'm telling you, if you don't know where to start there. It's easy. But that's Plutora. And there's just no reason to not get started because these tools will save you time. And frankly, they'll get you out of these weekend disasters.
Perfect. Let's get that poll closed. And while Charlene talks us through that, you can download that ebook.
Yay.
Yay. Okay, yeah, let's take a look at the poll. The question was, where are you on the capability map? And this was an interesting one. Lot more evenly spread. The majority, the largest percentage of folks, 26% said that they release on demand. And 20% said they release every sprint. And let's see, the third most popular was 17% who said they have release weekends. And then 14% said they have release nights. 13% said they release every 3 months. And 6% said releasing is like breathing. And then 5% said they release every 6 months. So
lovely. Thanks, Charlene. I was just sneakily having a look at this actually while Jeff's talking, and while those numbers look a little bit random, and it's kind of a bit of there's always two questions in there because there's one that's about release cadence and one that's about release behavior. But if you try and correlate the numbers, it's actually quite interesting. So if you add together, we release every 6 months and we release every 3 months, that's 5%, 13%. You get 18%. And then we've got 17% that are saying they have release weekends. So I would propose a theory that the people that are releasing every 3 months or 6 months are also the people that are having release weekends. Then we've got 14% having release nights, and we've got 20% that are releasing every sprint. So I would suggest that perhaps a good proportion of those people that are having release nights are also the people that are releasing on a sprint basis, or there's certainly a correlation there. What is interesting, though, is we do have 26%, which is great, saying they're releasing on demand, but only 6% that are saying that releasing is like breathing. So that means 20% of our people that are releasing on demand are still finding it frettingly stressful, which is not great. Any other comments from the speakers on that data analysis that I've just done quickly there?
I was thinking back to what you were saying about having the data and how important it is and that sort of thing. And then what people have said about how they're releasing. I'm wondering, you know, how are they accelerating, thriving, and growing? Because it takes curiosity. Do they have enough curiosity about why it is that that is the case? And that's where I think the data is so important, you know, to understand what is your capability and how are you applying that capability. It's what I call having a competency transformation. So if those 20% are still struggling, even though they're doing it on demand, I'd be looking at, you know, you can't make a decision unless you know. Get in there, get your curiosity going, and figure out what is it telling you, so that you can look at, is my capability matching it? Do I have the skill set matching it? Do I have the right people attached to that? And look at, why is it stressing? Because it shouldn't be a stress. It should be as simple as breathing.
I completely agree with that. I also want to comment for those folks that are still in the release every 6 months or release every 3 months. You ought to be part of the agent of change and recognize the power that you wield is that you sit in a place where you have oversight over the entire value stream. If you can transparently and in an automated fashion pull data in across this tool chain, you wield something very powerful for the organization and can act as an agent of change. Using this data, you can do things and say, you can actually show in your company, hey, you know what? These old waterfall pipelines, or this team over here that's doing things the old legacy way, they have way more incidences in production than this team over here that's doing smaller batch sizes and more automated. Every team, I want you to now be more, you know, pick your risk profile, and you can use the data to be that. You can transform what you're doing. What will definitely be the case, though, is over time, the role of the traditional, you know, knight in armor guarding the castle is probably going away. And so if you don't change your job style, you're probably just letting yourself work yourself out of a job. You need to transform so that you can help your company transform. And it's important.
I think we have time for one question. Is that okay, Charlene?
That is absolutely okay. Well, let's take a look at what we've gotten. Please know we've gotten a ton of questions in.
One, is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
So we've got loads of questions. I'm sure the Plutora team will follow up with all of them, but I want to actually pick Vipple's, which is, I'm going to put it to Jeff, and we'll probably only have time, Jeff, for you to answer it, I think. To get to a position of releasing on demand, do we need to remove all dependencies between applications, as currently we often need to wait until one system is deployed until we can deploy our system, sequencing considerations? Would this not take heavy investment in changing infrastructure and legacy systems? Jeff, a quick answer from you.
Oh, gosh. No, you don't have to wait. There are ways to work with this, and that's part of the purpose of this series, is that we'll be able to help explore that. But the very first step you need to do is to know and understand the dependencies and understand how you can get there by using tooling versus just trying to manually decipher what's there. And then, yes, you can find ways to release on demand with any team. But ultimately, go ahead. Ultimately, we've got to get rid of dependencies over time, and that's where we'll go.
Absolutely. And as Jeff said, this is part of a series. Today, we've been talking about how release management is getting into the DevOps flow. Join us next time, and we'll be talking about what's next for release managers. And in our final one, we're really going to be talking about the future and next generation releases. But now it's time to pass to Charlene.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, yes, that's all the time that we have for questions. And as Helen said, the folks at Plutora are getting a copy of all of the questions that came in. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you and get your question answered. Just a quick reminder to the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you will be able to do so. Following the webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, real quick, before we close things out, let's do that drawing for the 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Without further ado, our first winner is Tanya N. Congratulations, Tanya. Our second winner today is Daniel W. Congratulations, Daniel. Our third winner today is Ashok S. Congratulations, Ashok. And our fourth and final winner today is Jason C. Congratulations, Jason. We will be following up with all four of you via email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see anything there, please check your spam folder. Jeff, Helen, Simone, what a great conversation. I was blown away by all of the chat comments that we got and all the questions that came in. You guys hit it out of the park. So thank you so much. What a great presentation.
Thank you all. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.